You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
The Extraordinary Phenomenon Investigations Council presents Epic Voyages. Come join us as we enter and experience the great mysteries of the world with tonight's host,
Laurel Tague. Welcome aboard, everybody, to Epic Voyages on online radio, InceptionRadioNetwork.com tonight. We are going to be answering a very, very interesting question tonight, and that is, do you really know the true story about what happened to Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun at the end of World War II? You may think you know the answer, but the more I've read about it in the last several weeks, the more questions I've got. So we've got an expert online with us tonight in the guise of Jim Mars, perhaps not the guise, fellow Texan.
I'm real.
You're real. He's just barely swallowed part of a bison burger to get to the microphone here. Born in Fort Worth, so this is going to be Texas night. Jim, we're going to kind of have our own little version of Greater Tuna here tonight, okay?
Sounds great.
Jim if you haven't heard of Jim, then you really haven't been reading enough books. He's a prolific author and speaker. As I said, born in Fort Worth, began working as a journalist while still in junior high school. And Jim, I know something about you that probably is not common knowledge. I know that you made your TV debut on Slam Bang Theater with Icky Twerp.
That's right. That was monkeying around.
Right.
It was one of the original apes.
Right, and I think probably you're partly responsible for all of those Bigfoot sightings in North Texas. Then,
well, it's interesting because I am the first reporter who wrote about the Lake Worth monster, which was quite a hoorah that went on there for a little bit of people because. It started off as very real. I was a police reporter for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and I went in early one morning to the police station and was going through the police reports from the night before, and here was a report of people who had been parking out at Lake Worth near the Wildlife Center, and they reported that some hairy creature, threw a tire at them and scared them to death, and I thought, oh, what's this? Somebody's pulling a prank, So I went to one of the police captains and I said, what do you know about this? And he said, well, I don't know anything. He said, but those folks are still here. And I went, what? So I went and found them, and I want to tell you, those folks were truly scared. Whatever it was, it wasn't a hoax on their part. They were really freaked out. Anyway, so I wrote a story on that, and that started the great Lake Worth monster craze that went on for a while, and And there were people traveling out there, carloads of people with guns. They were out there looking for it, and the local authorities got pretty upset. They said, man, because half the people would go out there and wander all around, and a lot of them would stop and go, oh, and make some howl or something. And then the other half are out there driving around with shotguns and rifles, and they were really afraid somebody's going to get hurt. And but luckily it all kind of died away, and it was pretty interesting. It's an interesting story. It still comes up now and then.
It probably died down about the time that you sent that gorilla suit to the dry cleaners, right?
Right. No, this one wasn't me. I understand that some months later, I finally was led to understand that it was some students from Brewer High School that were playing a prank. They had an ape suit, but they left the ape mask off. They just put a kind of a clear plastic mask on the guy that was wearing it, and so it did look weird. It looked hairy and big, but had kind of this human face, and so it was kind of scary. And but then after all this stuff started, of course, needless to say, they were afraid to come forward and fess up. But I think the cops finally tracked it down and figured out what had happened, who did it. But number one, since they were juveniles, they couldn't be charged really with anything. And we couldn't use their name in the paper or anything. So nothing that was ever officially resolved about that, which is kind of cool because that allows the Lake Worth monster to continue to amble through history.
Kind of like the Lady of the Lake. Well, if the Lake Worth monster happens to be out there tonight in Cyberville listening to us, we want you to call in later after the first hour of the show and reveal yourself to Jim Mars, who started your career off. He tried to help you out, but the police wouldn't help. So please call. You mentioned that
they didn't have a great sense of humor about it.
No, I bet they didn't. And that image you described is very creepy with the clear face mask. Yuck. Mm-hmm. Jim worked at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram for a while, and he was also in the Army and wound up going back for a little while. You were in an intelligence unit during the Vietnam War. And then you became military and aerospace writer, and that's when you started your investigative reporting?
Well, I've been investigative reporting right on along, but that's when I formally became an investigative reporter. I was sent on assignments to Israel, to the Middle East, to Europe, and traveled around quite extensively some.
Wow. One of the many books that Jim has penned was Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, which served as a basis for Oliver Stone's movie JFK. And Jim, you were a chief consultant on the screenplay and the production, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow. If you took the minute, somebody in the chat room has popped up a picture of a bunch of your books in the chat room, and it's obviously there's so many of them that the print is tiny and you can't really make out what they are, but you must go to Amazon.com and check out Jim's books, and that's Jim Mars with 2 R's in it. And let me give you his website. It's Jim Mars with 2 M's and 2 R's, no spaces, .com. JimMars.com. So, the topic at hand tonight, Jim, is so interesting. The question is, of course, we've all been told ever since the mid to late 40s that Hitler committed suicide in the bunker on April 30th, right before the end of the war, and Eva Braun, he and Eva Braun had been married very recently, and she was killed. He even had his German Shepherd poisoned. They shot 2 of her dogs in the head, and Martin Bormann and someone else was seen carrying the corpses out, and they were supposedly burned. And then there's this alleged skull that the Soviets recovered, which later through the years now turns out to be the skull of a 26-year-old woman, and not Hitler's skull at all. At least I hope he wasn't a 26-year-old woman, and we just didn't know about it.
There's another whole conspiracy.
Oh, yeah. And in reading about this, I have found at least 6 different books, including yours, that talk about some of these stories, and it's fascinating. So let's just jump in. Hitler did have body doubles, is that correct?
Oh, absolutely, yes. But first, let's start off with, I want to paraphrase a quote from Winston Churchill,
okay.
who who once wrote, he said, "I'm going to look good in the history books." And he says, "I know that because I'm going to write them." And that's true. In fact, Churchill's history of World War II is still considered perhaps, one of the epitomes of the history of just prior to and during World War II. Well, but then again, as we all have heard, history is written by the victors, right? So whoever wins gets to write the history, and they can make it sound any way they want to. And so much of what we think we know, we don't really know. I've done a lot of extensive research, and I have found out that, we could have a program on each of these subjects, but I found out that the fellow that was killed outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago, and they said they had killed public enemy number one, John Dillinger. That was not really John Dillinger. We all saw the movie of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and of course at the end of it, they get gunned down by the Bolivian army. Well, according to my research, they paid the Bolivian army to say they'd killed them, and they slipped back into the United States and went on to live long lives under other names. Jesse James did the same thing. John Wilkes Booth did the same thing. It was not Booth that was killed in the barn in Virginia. He came, in fact, lived in Texas for a while and ended up committing suicide in Enid, Oklahoma in 1909, and then the body was heavily embalmed, carted around for a few years, and in 1931 I have the Associated Press clippings that showed that the body was autopsied by the Cook County Coroner's Office in Chicago, and the doctor said, well, history will have to make up its own mind, but based on 8 known physical abnormalities, we say this is the body of John Wilkes Booth. So a lot of what we know, we don't know. And yes, it's all just accepted history that Hitler died in the bunker, okay? And yet there is too much information to suggest that that didn't happen. And it would have been a simple matter for him to simply say, okay, goodbye, folks, I'm going to commit suicide. They'd slip in a body double. They shoot the body double in the head. In fact, he said he gave orders when he went back to his private apartments for nobody to enter until after 15 minutes after they hear a shot. Well, 15 minutes, that's enough time to do all kinds of things. So they hear a shot.
What a weird request. Don't come in until at least 15 minutes after you hear me kill myself.
I know. Oh, and it gets weirder because the one I like is Ava Brown's brother-in-law.
Feigeline.
Feigeline met with an actress friend of his there in Berlin and told her that there was a body double of Hitler. And he said, I'm not supposed to know that. And if Hitler finds out that I'm aware of this double, he said, my life will be forfeit. And apparently that's why he was killed, because he knew that there was a double in the bunker. So anyway, he says, yeah, don't come in for 15 minutes. And then after 15 minutes, the first person to go in was Martin Bormann, who there is now abundant evidence to show that he actually escaped, went to South America, and ran the international Nazi empire that continued in operation for years and years, and in fact was kind of blended with the military-industrial complex of the United States. And he was the first one to go in. And then we have Hitler's driver and some other people who went in, and by this time all they saw was a body wrapped in a blanket or a rug, and of a man and a body of a woman also wrapped up, and they carried them up and put them out in the garden and set them on fire and burned the bodies, okay? But see, so the people who were in the bunker, who see Hitler, they see him go into his apartment, he says farewell, they hear the shot, they are called in to pick up the body of a man and woman, carry it out to the courtyard of the chancery there, and help dispose of this body. They probably, in all honesty, thought they were there and witnessed the death of Adolf Hitler. But it would have been no problem whatsoever to simply kill the double, leave the body there of both the double and a double for Ava Brown, and then slip out. There wasn't a back exit to his apartments, which then could take them up, and then there's some fairly detailed descriptions of how they could have made their way to the river where there was a airplane with floats, which had landed there the night before, so it was entirely possible to land and take off. And then this is where that was all covered in my book, The Rise of the Fourth Reich. But another book that I'm particularly impressed with is one by the authors Simon Dunstan and Gerhard Williams, called Grey Wolf, The Escape of Adolf Hitler. And it is a new book. It was published in 2011. And Dunstan is a author, filmmaker, and photographer, and has written 50 books, as well as written and directed documentaries for the History Channel, which is pretty conventional and pretty staid and demands pretty high level of credibility. And then Gerard Williams is a television journalist and for more than 30 years, and he's worked for BBC, Sky News, and Reuters. So to me, these are pretty credible guys. And they have interviewed people, and they have tracked Hitler's movements by airplane and then by submarine to Argentina, where millions of dollars worth of gold, silver, and currency were placed in the hands of Juan Perón and his wife Evita. So they sheltered Hitler there, and he ended up living out his days on a small lake in a village there near the border of Argentina and Chile, called San Carlos de Borlache. Okay, and they interviewed people who were there and who served food and who maintained the grounds and all like that. And apparently, it was kind of an open secret, that people who were there, because there had been such a heavy German presence in that part of Argentina, and including people with lots of money and wherewithal, and they were able to shield Hitler. But I will say this: it doesn't sound like he had much of a life. He was ill and getting worse because of the bad medicine that he'd been given by Dr. Morel, and and because of the damage that he suffered in the bomb attack of July the 20th, 1944, and which has now been shown at Tom Cruise movie Valkyrie. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so he was secluded. He's cut off from the world. He can't really do anything. And so it's there towards the end, his life was to sleep late, get up, eat a little meager breakfast, take a walk, sit around, rant a little bit maybe, and then eat again, go to bed. It doesn't sound like a very exciting existence. In fact, according to their work, Ava Brown got fed up with the whole thing and finally left him after delivering a baby girl.
Oh, so they had a child.
So they had a child, apparently.
I'll be darned.
According to these guys.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of funny because they claimed that she gave birth to a little girl. And there are conspiracy theories that claim that Merkel of Germany, President Merkel, is actually the illegitimate daughter of Hitler.
Oh, wow.
Which I had heard a long time ago and just kind of laughed that one off. But now I go, well, wait a minute, if you had a little girl, I don't know, we'd have to go back and find out when Merkel was born. In fact, I may look on that right now.
Yeah, stay tuned, folks. Jim might do a little online research while we're on here talking. The Soviets, I had done some reading about all of these discrepancies in their claims. They had the bodies, they burned the bodies, they buried the bodies, they dug the bodies up, they moved the bodies, they dug them up again several years later. They had a skull, and as I said earlier, it turns out that the only skull that they produced that they said was supposed to be his is supposedly a 26-year-old woman. What's the deal with all of the discrepancies in the Soviet account of the remains of these two people that they claim to have found as they marched into the bunker?
Well, at the end of the war, number one, needless to say, there was a tremendous amount of confusion. There were DPs. Nobody remembers DPs. That's displaced persons. There's lots of DPs wandering all over Europe. Nazis were running for the Ratlines. They were trying to get out. The Germans were scrambling, just trying to get a piece of bread. The Russians were piling in from the east, and the Allies, the British and the French and the Americans, were piling in from the west. It was total chaos. And on top of all of that, the Russians had units of men, troops that were in there seriously looking for rockets, rocket scientists, rocket technology, mind control technology, all kinds of advanced technology, and we did too. We had units going in there specifically looking for this stuff, and so it was quite chaotic, and so nobody wanted, and everybody was war weary. Everybody was so happy that the war was over. That was it. I mean, even many of the Germans, even though they lost, at least they were glad the shooting was over with, and nobody wanted the thing to go on, so every little rumor that Hitler was dead was seized upon and as truth and presented and blown all over the place. And so even into the 50s and 60s, when some of these when bits of information were leaking out of Argentina and perhaps other places saying, hey, we think Hitler lived, there was never anything hardcore. You couldn't put your finger on it. There wasn't a picture of him, and there wasn't people, because he was protected by pro-Nazis. Yeah. And so there was nobody to say, hey, it's him, there he is, I got a picture of him, And even though these reports were pouring into the FBI, the CIA, nobody really wanted to deal with that. So they just said, well, it's unconfirmed, and they let it go, and they let his history just go right on saying that he'd been killed in the bunker. I wondered about this for years and years and years, because I've had a fascination and interest in the Third Reich, just for many, many years, and I've heard these stories, and I've tried to track them, and sometimes it tracks back to the Police Gazette, which was, kind of a supermarket tabloid type, and the tabloids have always had a heyday with that. Hitler's always seen somewhere. He's not in Argentina. He's seen in Arizona, or if he's not there, he's at Woodstock. So I mean, always a Hitler sighting somewhere. And of course, what better way to obscure the truth than to just have a lot of flack out there, to catch people's attention. So. But as you pointed out, they said, well, we've got his skeleton here, and we've got a skull, and we've got the teeth, and we got all this, and yet all of that can be called into question when you really begin to peel back the layers of propaganda and assumptions and just flat, sometimes lies.
I want to ask you something, Jim. Somewhere I read, and I can't remember which one of the pieces I read. I did a lot of reading on the internet the last week or so. Martin Bormann, someone's claiming that Bormann drugged the two of them and got them out. And then there's accounts of them either going overland through the Alps, or, as you said, getting to, is it the River Havel? And flying to, I guess, Spain, where they got on a U-boat or something and made it over to Argentina. But do you think Bormann had a role? Did he drug them, or was he just helping them?
Well, that's a good question. For my money, I think Bormann was pretty much in charge. He had managed to make himself chief of staff to Hitler. Nobody saw Hitler except they went through Bormann. He began to separate some of the other Nazi leaders from Hitler. And then like when Hermann Goering tried to say, well, shall I, try to conclude some sort of peace with the Allies, it was Bormann who convinced Hitler that Goering had turned on him and become a traitor, and he ordered him to be put to death, and of course he ended up committing suicide in Allied hands. But so Bormann was definitely the guy in charge. In fact, actually, it's even broader than that. In August of 1944, after the Allies had broken out from St. Lo, the Normandy beachhead, it became quite obvious that the Germans were not going to be able to push the Allies back into the sea, and that they were on the continent to stay. So it was just a matter of time before they would be able to defeat Germany. So in August of 44, there was a big meeting between Bormann and the head of the German Central Bank, and the head of the IG Farben chemical and pharmaceutical combine. These were probably the three most powerful men in Germany at that time, and they activated Action Adlerflug, which is Operation Eagle Flight. And it was the flight of capital, scientists, technicians, licenses, patents, copyrights, gold, silver, jewels, anything worth anything. They were taking it out of Germany. In fact, they created 750 corporations all around the world, usually headed by some foreign national. For example, you go to Paraguay, you set up a big corporation, and you put some fellow from Paraguay in as a figurehead of it, so that on the paperwork it looks like a Paraguayan company, but actually it's funded and run by the Nazis. 750 of these corporations were created, and that's in addition to the 500 or 600 corporations that were already Nazi-controlled. Not to mention the fact that a lot of the major British and American corporations, such as IBM, Ford Motor Company, the Standard Oil of New Jersey, IT&T, IBM, they had all done business and were interconnected with Nazi Germany. In fact, IBM, although they did close down their German operation, they continued to feed the Third Reich with computers and computer technology and punch cards through a subsidiary of theirs in Poland, which went straight to the Nazis. So even these major U.S. and British corporations were still working with the Nazis. It's been well documented that as late as early 1945, with the war almost over, Standard Oil tankers were still refueling German U-boats in the Caribbean. And of course, these people are so big, so powerful. They're the wealthy elite, and they never get prosecuted for trading with the enemy. Except there is an exception, which is kind of interesting. In the late fall of 1942, a director of Union Banking Corporation was prosecuted under the Trading with the Enemies Act for being nothing but a financial frontman for Hitler and the Nazis. He was funneling loans and money to Nazi Germany, and this was Prescott Bush.
Oh. Another Texan. No, sorry.
No. But he was the grandfather of George W. Bush and the father of George Herbert Walker Bush, and Laura, that's another thing that really irks me is everybody thinks, the Bushes, they're Texans, Texas oil people. Well, yeah, they came down here and got in the oil business with their money, but no, they're Yankee carpetbaggers from Connecticut. All right. In fact, Prescott Bush was a senator, a very powerful senator who helped create the Central Intelligence Agency from Connecticut. But he finally lost this office because people finally figured out that he was a Nazi sympathizer. But now what's really fascinating is when I found that out, I thought, well, gee, I wonder how. This is about the time when George Herbert Walker Bush was president. And I thought, well, how come people aren't aware of this Nazi background, and how come nothing more was done to Prescott Bush other than just strip him of his holdings in Union Banking Corporation and the Hamburg America Steamship Line, which has been well documented as being the chief conduit of saboteurs and Nazi propaganda coming in from Germany during the war. And I found out, thanks to a website, that they were praised. They had asked his son, George Herbert Walker Bush, to come and officiate and make a talk on the anniversary of Prescott Bush's founding of the United Service Organization in the summer of 1942, when I'm sure he must have been aware that they were investigating his Nazi ties. So he wasn't stupid. He goes and helps create the United Service Organization. Well, the USO, of course, was huge during World War II.
Right.
There was USO canteens everywhere, and I got to admit, they were still operating during Vietnam, which was my war. Mm-hmm. And everybody in the military loved the USO. That's where you go. You get to meet girls, you get to have free coffee and donuts, and you get a little taste of home, and it's great. It's a wonderful organization.
Not to mention Bob Hope.
Yeah, Bob Hope and all the actors would go and present things there. had the Hollywood canteen, with Hollywood stars who come and rub elbows with the service people. And it was great, wonderful organization. Well, they had helped created by Prescott Bush, this Nazi sympathizer. So you can imagine in the middle of World War II, they could not afford to let the public know plainly that the guy who founded the USO was a Nazi supporter. That would have been a propaganda disaster during the war, so they just stripped him of his holdings and fined him a few $1 million, which was probably pocket change to him, and everybody just went on. And his son, George Herbert Walker Bush, finally left Connecticut. They came down to Texas, bought into the oil industry, and then, hey, I don't have to tell you the rest. They became presidents of the United States.
Right.
And they pushed their neocon agenda, which stands for neoconservative, which was a prettied up term for National Socialism.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay?
Isn't that an interesting little tidbit?
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And of course, in the German language, the acronym for National Socialism is NAZI, Nazi. Mm-hmm. So they were a bunch of Nazis. And,
interesting. And you're kind of bordering on the topic of the Illuminati here, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. And all this was going on, and I'm sure Hitler was being kept up with some of this. But see, by the time the war was over, he was not in charge. It was Martin Bormann and Heinrich Müller, who had headed the Gestapo. It's interesting. My literary agent in New York was very good friends with Paul Manning, who was a New York Times reporter who wrote an incredible book called Martin Bormann, Nazi in Exile. And he tracked Bormann all the way to Argentina. He tracked all these business deals that were going on, and in fact had set up an interview with Bormann down in South America back, I think, in the early 70s, and in fact he flew down there and was in Argentina and was set to meet with Bormann because apparently Bormann was somewhat proud of this huge Nazi organization that he created during and after the war to keep National Socialism on a front burner. And but at the last minute, Müller, who had been head of the Nazi Gestapo and who apparently was in charge of security for this whole international Nazi group, put the kibosh on the meeting and said, no, we don't want this publicity at this time, and he stopped it. But what's really fascinating is that Paul Manning, who is no longer with us, told my agent that while he was there, he never did get to meet Hitler, but he did get to meet Eva Braun.
Oh.
In the early 70s.
Interesting.
So there is just more and more evidence, very highly suggestive, very compelling evidence that Hitler did survive the war, as did Eva.
I want to ask you a question, but before I do, let me remind everybody you're listening to Epic Voyages Radio on InceptionRadioNetwork.com, and this is Jim Mars, the Indefatigable, and he's talking to us tonight about where Hitler and Eva Braun landed because they didn't end up in the bunker like everyone thinks. Here's my question, Jim. Oh, nuts, I lost my place here. Someone in the chat room had asked a very good question. We were talking about Hitler's poor health earlier, and I had read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true, that he had Parkinson's. I don't know if that was just the effect of the drugs that his doctor had been giving him, but the theory that he basically kind of walked, I guess, unless there was a motorcade that took him and Eva from the bunker. I don't know why I'm getting feedback here. Took them from the bunker across the center of Berlin towards the zoo, and then following the train lines over to where you said they got to the river and there was a pontoon boat. If he was in bad shape at that point in time, how did was that a walk, or were they carting him around in a car? Because that's a long walk for a guy who might have Parkinson's. I know I've got a dad with Parkinson's, so.
Right. Well, number one, I'm not certain it's been proven or substantiated that he had Parkinson's. He did have a limp, and he did have some, I think, neurological damage because of the bomb
Okay.
July 20th, and then he had other physical problems, but I'm not sure that it was actually nailed down as being Parkinson's, and I don't really know, but it's my understanding that yes, they did walk a few blocks, but it wasn't that long or prolonged a period of time, and also he probably had some help. I'm not sure if they would have carried him or just kind of supported him.
Okay. Okay.
But I also found out that Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany since 2005, she's the leader of the Christian Democratic Union. She was born reportedly in 1954, and I'm checking here the book Grey Wolf, and it says that Ava's daughter by Hitler was named Ursula, and she was actually born in 1938. And they took her with them, or they got her to
Argentina.
Argentina, yeah, in September 1945. So I guess that leaves out Angela Merkel as Hitler's daughter.
Well, now one of these sources I was looking at in the last week said that they had two daughters. Yeah, so maybe it's possible that they had another one, and that's not the one that you found in 38?
38, That's possible.
Yeah. I also had read that there was quite a few very famous Nazis who landed in Argentina and either stayed there or went to Bolivia or somewhere else, including Mengele, Eichmann.
Oh, yeah.
Draganovich, who was someone I read about in another book that's just chilling. Talk to us about two things: the Ratlines and how the Vatican played a role in this.
Well, the Ratlines are simply a term for the underground railroad, so to speak, that passed the Nazis out of Europe and into other countries to hide out. The Vatican played a huge role in that because so many of them went out on Vatican passports. But then you have to understand that, there were all these secret agreements made before, during, and after World War II. And a lot of people, of course, get taught about this in school. There were the transfer agreements that were signed in Germany in the early 30s, which was, we need to get rid of the Jews, so we're just going to pack them off. We're going to ship them to Russia, and once we conquer lands there, we're going to send them to Palestine. We're going to get them out of Germany. But by the way, before you get out, you have to leave behind all your possessions. And so we're going to, not only are we going to get rid of them, but we're going to make a lot of money in the process. And these deals were cut with some of the Zionist leaders. Okay, so there were Jews who turned in the other Jews. And in fact, part of that was having to do with the Zionist movement, which is a political movement at that time pushing to create the state of Israel. And today, the Zionist movement is fully in support of the state of Israel. And so in order to try to get Israel created out of Palestine, they worked to deal with the Nazis, where they were going to, the Jews give up their possessions and the Nazis allow them to immigrate to Palestine. That was the transfer agreements, and it was involving some of the top Zionists themselves. And then you had a concordant that was reached with the Vatican, with the Catholic Church, and which was kind of a, we'll leave you alone if you'll leave us alone, is kind of the way it worked out. So many of the priests became Nazis, gave the Nazi salute and preached Nazism from the pulpit because they somewhat believed in it. Okay, it's like, hey, we're going to put on uniforms, we're going to march alike, everybody's going to move in the same direction. This is National Socialism. Okay, we're all going to be good socialists, and it's all for one for all. And so they supported it. And then at the end of the war, since they had been Nazis and since they had supported the Nazis, they were more or less constrained to help the Nazis escape. And they did, using Vatican passports and Vatican sources. And like Martin Bormann reportedly hid out at a Catholic monastery for a while. And so that was the tie-in there. And I don't know this, and I probably couldn't prove this, but what I suspect is that although Hitler and the Nazis tried to preach a humanistic outlook. They were kind of down on all religion. They tried to make Hitler the god and tried to make Nazism the religion. But yet they knew that the huge swath of the German people were very religious, in fact, very Catholic, so they had to reach accommodations with the Catholic Church. And I kind of suspect that the Catholic Church decided these Nazis are well organized, they know what they're doing, they've got a plan for the future, they're going to conquer Europe and perhaps the world, and we better have a stake in this, and maybe we can become their official state religion. And there is some evidence to back that up, because although Hitler's regime was basically anti-religious, they nevertheless had a pretty close working relationship with the Vatican.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like they were very gleefully scratching each other's backs there for quite some time.
Right.
I've got
a couple. I covered in the Rise of the Fourth Reich how that the Pope in the 30s. I'm trying to think which one that was. I'd have to go look it up. But he suddenly started making. Well, I think he began to realize what the Nazis were up to, and he began to make anti-Nazi speeches. Mm-hmm. But he only made a couple of those before he kind of died under strange circumstances. And it's interesting because his personal physician was a Dr. Petacci, who just, I'm sure by some strange coincidence, happened to be the father of Clara Petacci, that was Mussolini's mistress. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you can see how they're all tied together. And once this Pope died, then the new Pope came in, and he was very pro-Nazi. And he was the one that was still serving at the end of the war, and was able to, along with a few of the ranking cardinals, to get the Nazis out of Europe.
Wow!
And of course, then the previous Pope, of course, had been a Nazi in his youth.
Yes. Isn't it funny? We just keep coming back around to the starting point on the circle.
That's right. That's right.
We're gonna have to take a break in about a minute or two. I want to ask you something. There's a couple of really good questions in the chat room, but somebody said that the Bushes own 98,000 acres in Paraguay. Do you know anything about that?
I've heard different numbers. I've heard 77,000, but whatever it is, it's true. They bought a huge place down in Paraguay, and I joked about that at the time. That was in the news briefly, and I said, yeah, maybe they're going to open a subdivision. They're going to call it Borman Acres.
or Borman Wood.
Or maybe it is that they know, well, the Fuhrer went down there and hid out successfully. Maybe we better have a place down there to go hide out. Because George Herbert Walker Bush was quoted back in the early 90s as saying, if the American people ever find out what we've done to them, they're going to chase us down the street and lynch us.
Yeah, if I was thinking about an hour, well, not about 35 or 40 minutes ago when you were talking, that truth really is stranger than fiction.
Oh, it is.
You think you've heard it all and it's making sense, and then all of a sudden you find out that it's not at all what's been going on. Everybody, please stick with us here and come back after the break. We're going to take about 4 minutes, and you're listening to InceptionRadioNetwork.com. This is Epic Voyages online radio show with Jim Marrs tonight. You can see his website at jimmars, JIMMARRS.com. And I'm Laurel Tague, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Stick with us.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty landline or cell phone and dial or call and listen lines at 832-280-0830 or 786-837-2262 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, those numbers are 832-280-0830 or 786-837-2262. For the Inception Radio Network, I'm MJ.
Hi, Bob Tarmac for MJsHealthyWay.com. Are you into vitamins, nutrition, meal replacements, health shakes, keeping your body in good shape, your internal engine going? Boy, do I have a perfect place for you. MJsHealthyWay.com. They offer the best service and products, and they'll tell you anything you need to know about any product they have to offer. I get all my vitamins, meal replacements, shakes from MJsHealthyWay.com. That's spelled MJsHealthyWay.com. There's so much more at the website. Go check it out. MJsHealthyWay.com.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best.
Psst, are you looking for a cure for boredom? Never worry. IRN's new interactive website introduces a number of ways to pass time while you listen to your favorite show. Choose anything from the IRN Chat Lounge, the Game Lounge, Video Lounge, or the Mood Lounge. These fun, exciting features let you chat in real time with fellow listeners, view live skywatches, play daily posted online games, or pick a show based on topic. The choices are endless. Use your time wisely, keeping it all on IRN.
Howdy, this is Joe Mars. I'm inviting you to tune in to Epic Voyages, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday nights, right here on Inception Radio Network. To find out more about Epic and how you can become a member, visit epicvoyagers.com. That's EPICVOYAGERS.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Epic Voyages on InceptionRadioNetwork.com. Tonight we're talking with Jim Mars, the prolific author of some really fascinating research books, I would call them, on various kinds of happenings since, I would say, well, if we go back to Hitler, then I guess we're going to have to go back to the 30s and 40s, but JFK, 9/11, all kinds of conspiracies that turn out not to be perhaps conspiracies. Jim, did you see, I forget where I saw it on the internet this past week, someone had cited research that they've actually looked at people who believe in conspiracies, and they are more sane and normal than the people who say that there are no such things as these conspiracies. Did you see that?
I saw that, and I thought, whoa, tell me something I don't know. I already know that. The people I talk to who talk seriously about conspiracies are people who've done their homework, and they know history, and they know some of the controversies, and I may not agree with them on every little detail. They probably don't agree with me, but at least they have an understanding that most of what we think we know is wrong. And so, no, I saw that story, and it didn't surprise me in the least. I know people who are college graduates, some of them who have advanced degrees, who are really, really smart people, and they are doctors and they are lawyers and city and county and government administrators, and there's nothing dumb about them, and yet they are abysmally ignorant.
Oh,
okay?
yes.
Now, when you say ignorant, that doesn't mean they're stupid. That just means they don't know things, okay?
Right. And they're too lazy to dig into it and find out more.
Exactly. And then worse than that, they have been so conditioned to accept conventional wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's on CNN, or NPR, then, it's just got to be true. But if Jim Marrs says something, or Dr. Laura says something, or whatever, well, I'm probably just a conspiracy theorist, because I didn't hear that on CNN. And yet, you and I both know that CNN has put out absolute garbage, absolute propaganda. This is why their listenership just continues to drop, because people are beginning to wise up. Same thing, people go to Wikipedia and they don't realize that Wikipedia has been caught time after time, making factual errors and slanting things and skewing information, coloring things. It's amazing. The things we don't get told about. In fact, what you were bringing up here is the fact that there's no question that Hitler was put into power by Western banking interest. Okay, they funded him. They helped build up Germany. We made loans, the Dawes loan and others to Germany to help them build up their military, and that was all as a reaction to the spread of Russian communism, which we also created. Woodrow Wilson wrote that during World War I and the Russian Revolution, the bulk of the money that went from America to Russia did not go to the Kerensky government of the White Russians. It went to the Bolsheviks, went to the communists. We created the communists, and then they started getting out of hand. They were talking about workers of the world unite, and all of a sudden it looked like they were going to push their extreme form of socialism worldwide. Well, the bankers didn't want that, see, because even though they talk about the New World Order and say there's going to be one world government, they don't really want that. If it was one world government, then they'd make a decision. That would stick. Everybody has to do it. No, they don't want that. What they want is, in fact, if you want to see what the game plan is, just go back and read the works of Eric Arthur Blair. Eric Arthur Blair was a British socialist and well connected to the British aristocracy. And in 1948, he wrote a book with the numbers transposed called 1984. And he used the pen name George Orwell. Mm-hmm. And he wrote what I feel like he knew to be the game plan of these global socialists. And if you'll go back and read 1984, you find that they want to divide the world into three major economic blocks. In the book, in the novel, it's Oceania, Asiana, and East Asiana. In the world today, we have the European Union, the soon-to-be North American Union, and the future Asian Union. And then once they have these three blocks, all operating under a central authority, because you have to have a central authority to administrate a social program, then they play one block off against the other continually in a state of war and near war to keep up the tension and conflict that promotes their profits and their control. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So these same people created communism. It started to get out of control. They then had to create national socialism in Germany to act as a block to the spread of international communism. And why and how did these businessmen, particularly with all the financial links to the Rothschild banking dynasty, why did they support the overtly anti-Jewish Hitler? Mm-hmm. Well, part of the answer, I think, lies in a report by psychologists who produced, based on Vienna police reports and German police reports, during the war, a report that went to the old Office of Strategic Services, OSS, which was the forerunner of the CIA, and this never saw the light of day until he published a book in, I think, maybe the 1990s, or maybe the 1980s perhaps. But it shows that Hitler's grandmother, Maria Anna Schicklgruber, was working as a housemaid, a servant, in the home of Baron Solomon Rothschild in Vienna. And upon learning of her pregnancy in 1837, she left Vienna and gave birth to Hitler's father of record, Alois Hitler. But when the name was put on a birth certificate, it got altered somewhat from Hitler to Hitler. And so that was Hitler's father. And he then married another woman, and I think that was the Schickelgruber. And then they became the parents of Adolf Hitler. So wait a minute, if all that's true, then Hitler was a quarter Jewish. And not only a quarter Jewish, but related to the Rothschilds. And perhaps that's why they supported him early on, because the Rothschilds are not Hebrews. They are Ashkenazi Jews, or also known as Khazarian Jews. They come from the area of the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, the area which back at the 10th century was the Khazarian Empire. And when it was broken up by the Russes, they fled into Europe and became the Ashkenazi Jews of Eastern Europe and of Germany. And most of them were prosperous and pretty well versed in financial matters, and that was the progenitors of the Rothschild dynasty. And so, but they wanted, by the late 1800s, they had figured out that they needed to get a foothold in the oil-rich Middle East because petroleum was the thing, you know. In fact, it's really fascinating, but John D. Rockefeller, who, of course, by about 1898 had gained almost total control over the world's petroleum supply. In fact, in 1909, they had the Supreme Court broke it up, said it was a monopoly. But in 1898, he had almost single-handed control over the petroleum industry of the world. And it was real enlightening to find out that he got his start with money that was loaned to him by the Bank of Cleveland, which was a registered Rothschild bank. So in other words, the Rothschild, instead of putting one of their own people in power in America because they were already catching flack for running the economies and the central banks of Europe, they simply used the Rockefeller family as fronts for their business and financial business in the United States and North America.
If anybody out there in listening land would like to talk to Jim Marrs and ask personal questions, he's got answers for everything. Please call 888-919-2355 or get on the chat room and send us a question. Jim, I've got a couple of questions here for you in the chat room.
I've got a couple of answers.
I bet you
of course, hey, truthful answers cost $5.
They're higher.
They are.
Someone says that they had heard that Hitler fathered one of Goebbels' children. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, that's been alleged. I've heard that, and it's entirely possible. Magna Goebbels, his wife, was just a Hitler fanatic, you know, a Hitlerphile. And so I think it's entirely possible that she might have given herself to Hitler at some point. But the thing is, I'm not sure that anybody knows that for certain, and at this late date, it's probably going to be now and then impossible to prove anything like that.
Odd. Here's another question. The mountain lake city that was created in Argentina or Paraguay where Hitler supposedly lived with Eva. What do you know about that?
Well, that was that...
the one that you...
Yeah, the one I just named to you. It's
okay.
Again, it's... the San Carlos de Bariloche. Anyway, well, all I can tell you is that this was an area of Argentina that had been long settled by German settlers. And in fact, they had an Ausland organization there that was very pro-Nazi. So, the culture of that place would have been perfect for any Nazis, and particularly even Hitler, to go and hide out. It was just a sleepy little place, but it was very isolated. I'm not even sure for a long time that you could reach it by car. You had to go by ox cart or horseback or something like that, or you had to fly in. You had to fly in and land on the lake and with a pontoon plane. And so it was really perfect. And not only that, but here's what I found interesting is that it was in a place that was very beautiful and green on this little lake. It was high, it was mountainous, and there were huge mountains all around. And when I was reading the descriptions of this Bariloche, it suddenly was reminding me of Berchtesgaden. which I have visited, and I've been to the Eagle's Nest and stood up there, and you look out over Austria and southern Germany, and it's an amazing place. And this place obviously looked like some of the countryside there in the Alps in Bavaria.
So, in the Tyrolean region,
in the Tyrol, exactly. And so that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you say lived in Phoenix all your life, and you're going to have to go halfway around the world, you're going to want to go to a place that's hot and kind of deserty, and it's going to remind you of home, right?
Yeah, and it does. It sounds a lot like in the pictures that I did see, even the way that they built their chalets and their homes. It was very Tyrolean.
Yeah, exactly.
It looks like the sound of music.
Yeah, exactly. And so here you are in a beautiful mountainous place that kind of looks like the Tyrol, and you've got a German-speaking population, and you got pro-Nazis. I mean, what else do you want?
And you don't have anybody breathing down your neck like you would over in Germany and Austria at this point.
That's right.
Yeah. Here's another question. Can you
and I understand, according to the Grey Wolf book, that Adolf Eichmann actually was there for a while, but he apparently pined for the city life. He wanted a little more action, and so he moved to Buenos Aires, and of course he got caught by the Israelis.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Did you ever say at what point Hitler supposedly died in Argentina? Did you say that earlier? I don't think you did.
No, I don't think we've said that. According to this book, he died in 1972.
72.
But like I said, those last years, from about the last 10 years or so, say from 62 to 72, it wasn't much of a life.
No.
He was just kind of vegging out there.
Yeah, that's pretty. I'm not going to feel sorry for him.
And Borman was running the show along with Mueller, and then and I'm sure there were younger people coming along who were taking over some of the operational duties for the Nazi International, and they've probably totally taken over now. So I'm pretty sure all the old original hardcore Nazis they're either out to pasture or are dead by now.
Yeah, but I'm sure that their ideas are still kicking.
Still going.
All
you have to do is look and read the platform of the Nazi 25 step plans, and you find that they're almost exact duplicate of the Illuminati 25 plank platform and of the communist. In fact, I'll just look that up because it's something we need to be aware of because it's all happening right here.
I want to call to everybody's attention that you have two other books besides this one, the Fourth Reich. You have one called Our Occulted History, which is your latest book, where you have an amalgam of all kinds of things. Some of it relates to what we're talking about tonight, and the Rothschilds and the Illuminati. And then you mentioned another one. I forget the title, about secrecy.
Ruled by Secrecy.
Ruled by Secrecy, right.
Now, that traces the secret societies from antiquity all the way up till today.
Listeners ought to really check out Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble, or go to Jim's own website at JimMarrs, JimMarrs.com, where you can also get his books. It's a complete, probably at least through a master's level graduate degree in history if you'll read all of his books.
Here are some of the 10 steps to create an ideal state as offered by Karl Marx in his Communist Manifesto, and it sounds incredibly similar to the agenda of the Bavarian Illuminati and then later the Nazi Party. And if you stop and think about it, a lot of it's happening to us right now. Abolition of private property, a progressive or graduated income tax, abolition of all inheritance. They're trying to do away with the inheritance taxes, okay? Confiscation of property of dissidents and immigrants, okay? This is already happening, except now it's not just dissidents and immigrants. It's if they catch you with a joint, they take your house and your boat and your cars, right? Creation of a monopolistic central bank. Well, can you spell Federal Reserve System? There it is. Centralize all communication and transportation. That's happening. Central control over all the factories and farm production. That's happening. Okay, today if your kids try to set up a lemonade stand, the city officials will be all over them, demanding a license and health study and everything else. Central ownership of capital with a deployable workforce. Hey, that sounds like us, doesn't it? A few corporations run everything, and the deployable workforce is flipping burgers. Blur the distinction between the rural country and the cities. Well, it's not being blurred today, it's being eliminated. You're either big agriculture with huge corporate farms, or you moving back to the city. Man, the little gentleman farmer is just about being wiped out. And last but not least, free public education for all children. And there you go. And that's when you catch them at an early age, and you condition them to be good little socialists.
Yeah, I think that's also called programming.
Exactly.
Yeah. Golly.
So see, it's all happening, and we're just we're the frog in the pot, and the pot's starting to boil, and we're still just sitting there.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell whether you're in the pot or the kettle at this point, but neither one of them are very comfortable.
Nope.
We've got someone in the chat room who wants to know if you have any idea where the daughters of Hitler might have wound up. We had talked earlier. You said that Ava supposedly left him and took at least one of them with her. Do you know anything else that, other than the fact that we don't think that any of them are Angela Merkel at this point, do you know where they might have wound up?
Hopefully we put that one to rest. No, actually I really don't, I'll admit. Some of this information about the two daughters is fairly recent, or at least to me. It's kind of new to me. And I have not had the opportunity to really track all that down. And in fact, I would think it's going to be very difficult to do that. I'm sure there's somebody within the CIA or the State Department that's got a little secret file hidden away somewhere that might have some of that knowledge, but as far as knowledge in the public, I would doubt very seriously if that's out there. I also would suspect, since they both were either born or initially were in Argentina or South America somewhere, that they might have remained there.
Ah. Okay.
Because you usually stay where you were born and reared.
Well, but you had
unless your parents are in the military or something, you travel around a lot.
Right. Or unless you were hoping to become president of the United States one day.
Yeah.
You had said one of them was born in 1938, and that would have put them probably over in Germany. That one daughter, if that was inaccurate. I mean, you never know.
Right.
I
and
would
the
imagine
other one apparently was born in 1945, mid to late 45, which means she was probably in transit, moving from Germany to Argentina.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they arrived in Argentina until maybe even I need to go back and check, but it seems like there was considerable months, maybe even a few years before they arrived in Argentina. It didn't happen overnight.
No. And do you think that they did go by U-boat? I had seen that in a couple of different places.
Yes, I think so. It might explain the three giant U-boat that turned themselves over to the Allies just a few weeks after the war ended in South America. And they were in South America when the war ended. And they had room for all kinds of passengers and a load, but they were empty. And their crews didn't know or wouldn't talk about who they had carried.
Interesting. We were talking earlier a little bit about religion and the Catholics and the Vatican. Hitler was really into the occult, and I know that there is. I don't know a whole lot about the Vril and is it the Thule, another group?
Gesellschaft, yes, the Thule Society.
Very much the occult, right?
Right. Yeah, in fact, according to his biographer, John Toland, in his book, Adolf Hitler, in a poem that Hitler wrote during World War I in 1915, here's what he wrote. He says, I often go on bitter nights to Wotan's oak in the quiet glade with dark powers to weave a union. The runic letter the moon makes with its magic spell, and all who are full of impudence during the day are made small by the magic formula. Sounds pretty occult to me.
It sounds kind of creepy.
It kind of is. In fact, there is a creepy aspect to the whole thing over and above the fact that so many people died and we had a world war. And there's been several people who say that when Hitler made a talk early on, he would show up, usually late, to build up excitement and tension, and then he would come out, and he was just this small, diminutive little guy, and kind of quiet. He'd walk out, and they almost acted as if he was bashful and shy, and then he would start to speak in a kind of a low tone, and then it was almost as though he shifted. It was almost as though he just became a separate person, and he would then launch into it, and he would use phrases and words, and he would begin to get louder and louder and shout and get real impassioned, to the point of where he would take an audience that were kind of so-so when he arrived, and by the time he was at the height of his oratory, they're screaming, hollering, jumping up and down. There obviously was some real power there, and I guess what I'm trying to say is it almost seems like that it was not totally his.
Yeah, I see your point, and yet on the other hand, I saw in a little blurb about you on Wikipedia that you were raised in a very strict Southern Baptist home, as I was. And we're both recovering from that probably still today.
Right.
You and I both know that...
the devil made him do it.
Well, you know that kind of fervor can be used as almost a hypnotic device in oratory.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a lot of evangelical ministers that have developed that to an art form, and that when I see him speaking in the old black and white reels of film, I'm looking at him and thinking it's just like a tent revival.
Yeah, exactly, and just like the old time evangelists could get that whole tent full of people on their feet, stomping and shouting, and so did Hitler.
Yep.
You've seen the newsreels, it'd be 100,000 people all going, Sieg,
yeah.
There they all are. And never underestimate the power of the collective consciousness.
Oh, yes.
When you get a group of people together, unfortunately, we are animals, and sometimes we act just like panicked animals. If everybody's running for an exit, everybody will run for the exit.
Yeah, well, I mean, with what we're just starting to understand about electromagnetic fields, and if each one of us has an electromagnetic field and we're all in a big group of people and our electromagnetic fields are getting whipped up by something like that, who knows how much of that is completely electrical that's happening?
Well, they can prove this scientifically. It's called brainwave entrainment. And what you do is you get a tuning fork, and then you get another tuning fork, and you tap one, and it starts vibrating at a certain frequency. You say A, A, and then you simply hold the other one up next to it. You don't hit it, you don't tap it, you just hold it up next to it. Before long, it's vibrating at A. So our electromagnetic fields that surround our body and activate us, and probably are actually the real us. I mean, we're energy beings inhabiting these meat sacks, okay? And so this energy being is vibrating at a certain frequency. And so when you get up next to another energy being, it by brainwave entrainment, it'll start vibrating at the same frequency. That's why I'm sure everybody's had the experience that maybe, say you're just kind of okay, and you go to a party, and it's a real frenetic party, and everybody's jumping and dancing and laughing and screaming and hollering and going wild, and pretty soon you are too. Or you go to one, and it's real quiet and dull, and everybody's kind of sitting around, and you're ready to party, but it ain't happening, so pretty soon you're sitting there. You're doing the same thing, because we latch on to the other frequencies, and we tend to vibrate and go along with the frequencies that surround us.
Well, you yourself have written about some of the pre-end of World War II technology that the German, they were like, I'm not going to say addicted, but they were just seduced by all of the occult information, the Sumerian, the Babylonian, the ancient Egyptian, and there's a lot of that has to do with sonic manipulation and energy vibration.
Yeah, and I think, in fact, they picked up a lot of their information, their technology, from non-human sources. And but here's what's interesting. For years I've heard stories about, well, they captured a flying saucer in North Africa. No, they captured a flying saucer in Poland. And I kept trying to track these stories, and none of them ever really seemed to pan out. And I am now of the opinion that they begin to make contact with non-humans as far back as about the time of World War I, 1915, 1918, somewhere in there, through the German metaphysical societies, the Vril Society, the Gesellschaft, and the way they did it was psychically. It's like we use remote viewing. Well, they were doing remote viewing, and they came into contact with non-human intelligences, and by having what we would have called then seances. And what's really fascinating is that at the end of the war, we went in and we grabbed all their rocket scientists, and we got all their chemical warfare experts and mind control experts. But when it came to psychic matters, none of our people believed that, so we kind of let it go. But the Russians, they went in and grabbed their psychics, and that's what led to psychic experimentation behind the Iron Curtain, which then in turn, when we found out about all this, we in turn had to start experimenting and developing remote viewing, the psychic phenomena that our military has used. And what I now find out is that the Nazis, this was all under a metaphysical program called MAJIK, M-A-J-I-K. Now, this is really fascinating to me because if you know your UFO literature, and then you know that early on, the group that was put in charge of the UFO issue was known as MAJIC 12, M-A-G-I-C. And later, I think in an effort to confuse the public, they said, no, it's Majestic 12. They might have actually changed their name just to try to keep everything hidden, but originally it was MAJIK, and I think it may have been a continuation of the Nazi MAJIK metaphysical program.
And you have, it's interesting. I guess you weren't listening to Jerry Pippin that was on just before we started, but his guest was actually plugging the book that you wrote in the 90s, and you had it at the publisher, and they refused to publish it at the last minute. About psychic, about remote viewing and psyops.
About remote viewing. Yes.
Say something about that.
I'm still irked about that. That was when I, with the success of my JFK assassination book, Crossfire, as I travel around the country, I'd ask everybody, what do you think's the next big, deep, dark, secret government cover-up? And almost without exception, almost unanimously, people said, we want to know what's the truth about UFOs. So I said, I've always been interested in UFOs. I kind of want to know that too. So I began to start heavily researching UFOs, and I began to get back into the UFO research community, and as a result, I became aware of remote viewing. And I just went, wow. I said, now here's a real story. I got sidetracked because I thought, remote viewing, this psychic warfare program to use psychics to spy on our enemies, and see things through time and space. And I'm going, what a story this is. I said, because look, it's either true or it's not true. If it's not true, then there's a heck of a story, because look at this waste of taxpayer money. And if it is true, wow, this is a giant leap for mankind, So I stopped and to dig into the psychic remote viewing of the military. Got 3 of these remote viewers who were willing to put their name on the line, even though they had all signed secrecy oaths, even though this program was still a very classified program at that time. This was in the early 90s. And so I started researching and found out all about their experimentation at Sanford Research Institute and at the Monroe Institute, and all the scientific study that had gone into it, and heard all these tales, and started trying to interview some of the people involved in the unit, and some of them wouldn't talk to me at all, and some would only talk very hesitantly but didn't want their names used, and very few, since it was a classified program, most of them didn't want to talk about it. And so I was so enthusiastic. I said, man, look, we've got this great story, and it's very real, and it's all happening, and they're using taxpayer money, and they got this whole unit in the United States Army's Intelligence Security Command. You know, I said, this is going to be great. And it got to the publisher. They even had advanced orders, and all of a sudden they just said, no, boom, slam. Said, no, can't publish this, and could never give me any real reasonable explanation. And to prove that it was nothing more than just censorship, you know that if you try to publish a book and the publisher gives you advance payment of some sort, and then it turns out that for whatever reason you cannot publish that book, either because of a legal problem or because something turns out to be not true or whatever, you have to pay back the advance, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they paid me the rest of the money. He said, hey, you know, here's the money, take it, go away. You know,
kind of like hush money almost.
Hush money, yeah, you know. And then, if you follow the chronology, which I wasn't aware of at the time, that I was about to break open this classified program. It was going to come out in the summer of 1995, and it was still a classified program. Nobody knew about it, and that's why I was so excited. This is going to be a big scoop. And but then they canceled the book, and then within 2 weeks, the CIA had ordered up a study of remote viewing, but heavily loaded with a skeptic and a debunker who, needless to say, you know, came out with a report that says, oh, well, there's really nothing going on here, unsurprisingly. And that went on for a few months, and then that's like 2-3 months later, they came out with this report, and they actually issued a press release, the CIA, saying, okay, here's what we've been doing. We've been doing this remote viewing and studying it, and we don't think it's all that good, and we don't think it's very real, and we just thought we'd let you know. Come on. When's the CIA ever voluntarily broken open one of their classified projects, you know?
Never.
So I think they got upset that I was going to break the story and make it seem too real, because what I did was lay the groundwork and show the history, showed the experimentation, showed how they formed the unit. You can still find all this in my book, Psi-Spies, PSI Spies, The True Story of America's Psychic Warfare Program. Because years later it was finally published, but at this time they didn't want it, because at the end of the book, after establishing the validity of the remote viewing experience, I brought in the fact that they had all seen UFOs and that they're very real and that they're not us. And they didn't want that out in a credible manner.
Wow, so many secrets. I'm glad that you mentioned the title, because I had it pulled up here on Amazon.com. You really need to go to Amazon.com or to Jim Mars's website, Jim Mars, JIMMARRS.com, and check out his titles. Look at the book titles. They're available, I think probably every one of them is available as a Kindle or an ebook, and they're available in hard copy.
I think so, except the thing that bothers me, I think they're all available as on a Kindle or electronic, except for Alien Agenda, my book on UFOs, which, interestingly enough, I'm told, is the top-selling nonfiction book on UFOs in the world.
Yes, I saw that online today.
It's been translated into a dozen languages and everything, so it kind of surprises me that the one that's a worldwide bestseller is the one they don't have on electronics.
Obviously, it's just more of the cover-up.
Who knows? I'm not going to say that, but you said that, not me.
But you really do need to check out these titles. We're getting close to running out of time, Jim. We've still got some time left. Another question here in the chat room. What do you think about the Bohemian Grove?
Oh, well, you know, it depends on who you want to listen to, but isn't it interesting that these good old boys have to get together and go out and worship the owl and dance around, play like they're sacrificing a virgin, and they say, oh, well, we're just playing around, you know. Well, I like to go out and play around too, but I don't act like I'm sacrificing a virgin. I think there's probably something there. That my friend Alex Jones, as you know, infiltrated there one time and got some pretty interesting stuff. And again, it's the fact that it's always these top guys, okay? Top leadership people. They're very heavily involved with the Trilateral Commission or the Council on Foreign Relations or the big banks, the big corporations. You know, if this is not just your local good guys, members of
Not the Lions Club
the
or
Lions
the
Club,
Kiwanis.
yeah, or the what is the guys that the tree choppers? I forget.
Oh
what
yeah, the Log International Society of Log something or other. I've seen
yeah,
that
the
too,
loggers,
yeah.
something like that. You know, these service organizations. It's not that. Now these guys are all heavy into stuff, and yeah, they want. And the thing is, you just can't go and find out. You know,
It seems like a very extremely strange pastime. Very, very odd.
yeah. You know, they say, well, we're just blowing off steam and kind of getting together. But here's the thing. Hey, let's put it this way. What if the owners of all of the national football teams met in a big old hotel, secluded way off somewhere with heavy security, wouldn't let anybody in, wouldn't tell anybody exactly what it was they're talking about? Wouldn't the media go nuts?
And wore funny clothes and...
Yeah, wouldn't they scream restraint of trade, collusion, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's not right. You got to tell us what you're talking about. But here's the captains of industry, and nobody ever holds their feet to the fire.
Yeah, it's like they're kind of above that level of
well, a lot of them own
supervision.
The media.
Yeah, well, that's true. Or they own the media. Yeah.
And it's like the old line that says freedom of the press belongs to the guy that owns the press.
Yep, like the way that history turns out, it belongs to the guy who wrote the book and had it published.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's why, what might be a fun thing for some of your listeners sometimes sitting around, if they're really interested in this Hitler angle, sit around and figure out what stories we'd be seeing and what the history books would look like if the Nazis had won. You know, it'd all be turned around. It would be Franklin Roosevelt, that evil dictator, that pro-communist, and who was leading the West to rack and ruin. You know, I mean, you just probably get the same stuff, but it would be reversed because the victors write history.
I think that would be an interesting screenplay, Jim. You should consider that. Trying to write it.
I'd love to, but you can never get it past the bean counters in Hollywood. If you can't show them by computer that, hey, this will make at least as much money as the Amityville Horror 14, then they don't want to consider it. They just rarely ever go for anything that really breaks the mold and gets out of the conventional rut.
Yeah. Well, before I run down the roster of what's coming up here on Epic Voyages Radio and the meeting coming up in September, what are you up to in the next 3 or 4 months, Jim?
Well, on August 29th, that's a Thursday night, I'm going to be presenting a program along with Michael Tellinger, who I would hope that your audience would become familiar with. He's a researcher from South Africa, and he and some of his scientist friends have discovered these stone circles representing, there's millions of them over in South Africa, and these date back over 200,000 years. And in fact, he believes he might have located the African laboratory of the Anunnaki god Enki. That is mentioned in the Sumerian tablets, and who, by the accounts, had a laboratory in Africa. Right. And he has found lots of amazing stuff over there. So we're going to be presenting some material on that just that one night at the Cathedral of Light over in Farmers Branch outside of Dallas. And that's about it until end of November, when I'll be in Dallas for the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination. And, of course, the city is working hard to keep anybody who would say anything other than Oswald did it all by himself out of Dealey Plaza, which is just really irking me because we've tried to get permits there for years, and they said, no, you don't need a permit. You can't get a permit. And then this year on the 50th anniversary, when they know full well that there'll be media from all over the world there in Dallas, all of a sudden they grabbed it and said, they've reserved the Dealey Plaza for that whole week and nobody can go in. Come on.
Hey, I have a solution. I have a solution for you, Jim. Dig out that gorilla suit that you used on Slam Bang Theater and go incognito.
There we go. No, what I like to see happen is supposedly they're going to let 5,000 people in, but only after each one of them have been vetted by the Dallas Police Department. So, in other words, anybody who might have written a book or made a talk or has said anything that hints at conspiracy in the Kennedy assassination, they probably won't be allowed, okay? So there you got 5,000 people that they're going to let in. Well, I'd like to see 25,000 people show up and surround the park and just go, hey, here's the truth.
Yeah, I'm afraid they've probably already got your picture on some leaflets that they're passing out.
Oh, yeah, probably so.
Yeah. I want to tell everybody, in case you aren't aware of the epicvoyagers.com website, that is the website for Epic. There is also a YouTube channel for Epic Voyagers, and on that YouTube channel, you will find a treasure trove of all kinds of video clips. Many of them of the meetings, the epic meetings that happen almost every month, once a month in Grapevine, Texas, including at least 2, if not 3, of Jim himself, speaking one time on our occulted history, right, Jim?
Right, that's correct.
Do you remember what your other topics were? I think you're on there 3 times.
I think I made one on the rise of the Fourth Reich, which is along the lines of what we've been talking about tonight, and then I'm not sure. I either made one.
I want to say Alien Agenda, wasn't that?
Yeah, I think it was either Alien Agenda or the Kennedy assassination.
I'm thinking it might have been Alien Agenda.
I'm thinking you might be right.
Yeah, but I know that Ken Cherry, the president of Epic, is adding new videos there all the time. You'll find Jim. Yep. You'll find Nick Redfern. You'll find Dr. Sam Osmanagic, who is the fellow who's digging the Bosnian pyramids, John Capella, lots of names that you'll recognize. So check out the YouTube channel and the website for Epic Voyagers. And
if you can make the Epic Voyagers meeting there in Texas, we've had some really, really good get-togethers, and it's a pretty good, enthusiastic bunch.
Well, here's a good deal for all of you listeners out there. If Jim and Michael Tellinger are going to be presenting in Farmers Branch at the Cathedral of Light on August the 29th, on 9/1, the Epic Voyagers meeting in Grapevine, the monthly meeting, will be Nick Redfern and his co-author, Dr. Robert Wood, talking about their new book, Alien Viruses. And then the very next night, Monday night, Nick will be online here on Epic Voyages Radio on InceptionRadioNetwork.com, and they'll be talking about their book that night. So that would be a jam-packed weekend for anybody if you were happen to be in the North Texas area. Let me run down who's coming on radio next week. Dr. Rita is going to be here with you talking to Robert Stephen Thomas, the author of Intelligent Intervention. Nick Redfern, of course, on the 2nd, as I just said. Dr. Rita's back on the 9th with Bruce Cunningham, who is the organizer for the Ancient Mysteries Conference. I'll be back again on the 16th talking to Dr. Sam Osmanagic about his 2013 Bosnian Pyramid research season. And some of you may remember a couple of weeks ago, I was interviewing Dr. Aaron Judkins, who was about to climb Mount Ararat on an expedition to look for the Ark. And he will be back shortly, probably within another week or so, and I'll be interviewing him again to find out all that he went through and what they found, and that'll be in early October. So
have you heard any further on that?
No, he made it pretty clear to me that they've been told not to say too much. He's got a couple of pictures on Facebook and on his website, but they're pictures of him on top of Mount Ararat and sunrise with the shadow of Mount Ararat. They're the Discovery Channel's filming, and I'm pretty sure that they're trying to keep it out of the limelight until they can publish it themselves.
Right.
So, well, Jim,
that's going to be interesting, though.
It's going to be fascinating. I'm looking forward to seeing you in Texas. I'll be back down there in another month myself, and maybe we'll get together with Ken and knock back a couple of dark beers and eat some Mexican food.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And don't forget to check out Jim's website, Jim Marrs, JIMMARRS.com. This is InceptionRadioNetwork.com, the only place to listen to. And we'll see you in another week.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's Epic Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic. Until next time.
Cover up the